Hello, I'm the real Super Cheesy. I'm here to make my first ever video. Very crazy, I know. But today, I really just wanted to start talking about things about Guilty Gear, especially Strive, lore, stuff like that. So I thought I'd start off with the most interesting stuff to people. Who's actually coming to Strive? And I'm not here to be like who I personally think is going to come to Strive. No. That's not what we're doing here. Don't worry. There's plenty of videos like that. What we are doing today is going through and looking at the story mode, arcade mode, character dialogue, and sure, we'll look at data mines too because they have been rather accurate thus far. But anyways, let's just jump right into it. What I like to call the big three. Not like My Hero Aka, but the big three are just the characters that have the most likely chance of either being this first final DLC character or in the future DLC. So let's start off with the character everyone thinks is basically confirmed at this point, Slayer. And the main reason people think he's actually going to be the next DLC is due to the data mining. If you didn't know, audio files were found for Jacko, Happy Chaos, Biken, and Slayer. Maybe also Gold Lewis is actually discovered after he was already in the game, but it was already like in the game. What did people notice? I don't know. But anyways, since that's been the most accurate dictator thus far, it makes a lot of sense to actually follow that logic. But here's where things get interesting, because even outside the data mining, he's been teased and mentioned quite a bit in Strive. First off, in the story, when Soul's fighting Nago in the White House, Soul sees Nago turn into a vampire. Seeing this, he says,
"A Nightless. So that old dandy isn't the only one left, huh?"
So, while not an actual name drop, I think it's pretty clear who this is pointing at. But then, it goes even deeper once we get into the arcade mode, where his name actually is dropped. Twice! Once in Sato's arcade mode, where if you beat the level 9 Nagarayuki, he'll say,
"Impressive."
A Nightless? Could he be connected to Lord Slayer?
The second is actually in Nago's own arcade run, where if you beat the level 8 Nago with Sato's help, Sato tells Nago that,
Now that the battle is over, we've time to spare. Come, let us visit Lord Slayer together.
So it's very likely that this up-and-coming story mode edition will be partly following Nago on his journey to find himself. And Slayer and Nago might have a lot more in common than we think. As brought up in the Happy Chaos arcade run, Nago was not actually born a vampire, compared to Slayer who was. So Slayer actually might have been the one to either turn Nago into a vampire, or at the very least might know who turned him into a vampire. Either way, we'll most likely definitely see Slayer in this new story mode, and he'd make a lot of sense in regard for that final DLC spot. The only two things pointing towards him maybe not being that next DLC are the trends that the DLC have had thus far: new, white hair, male, old character, red hair, female. Okay, which doesn't mean anything for sure, it's just kind of a funny little thing, but the second one's a little bigger. That's being the data mine for the next stage, actually. Well, of course, this is not confirmed. It's the same thing happened with Biken Stage, where we actually did see bits and pieces of it before it actually came out, with the patch right before it. And this time, it's pointing towards this next DLC stage being the White House. And since Slayer has already had such an iconic and beloved stage, it would definitely be a missed opportunity to not add it back. But overall, due to these reasons, Slayer is up there with probably the most likely next DLC character. As for our next big three character, it's one of the biggest characters, not just Strive, but all of Guilty Gear. Of course, that being Asuka. He's a major player in the story mode, literally in all the promotional material for the game. He's with Ino and Soul right on that cover. And in the story mode, we actually get to see him fight quite a bit. Like, we see him beat Soul in a fight, shoot like beams, have his own unique spell circles or triangles or whatever that are, just like we see Happy Chaos has his own unique stuff. Which on top of his redesign is kind of a big deal to have him playable eventually. The only issue with this idea is Ariel, though, from Zerd, since she also never became playable, and we did see her also fight quite a bit. And Asuka has been in all the games and never playable before. But hey, this might finally be the one. And with the White House being the most likely next stage, out of all the characters, besides Vernon, which, I'm sorry, he ain't gonna be playable, or like Gold Lewis would have worked, but he's already a playable character, and they missed out on that opportunity. But looking at the files at launch, it looked like both Gold Lewis and the White House stage were intended to be added at launch, but they weren't. So that would have made a lot of sense and cool. And sorry, I read it. But anyways, Asuka would have made a lot of sense for the White House map, and not only at the end of Season 1, but at the beginning of the new story mode. He also was data mined really early with his model, alongside Gold Lewis, Jacko, Happy Chaos, and Jam. But yeah, Jam isn't in the game, and Jam and Asuka files have not really been touched at all, so sadly it's been looking more and more unlikely. He did also have a model with extra bones, implying that he may have an install, which would have been dope, and if he ever gets added, it would be really cool to see if he does. One thing that is good though is that both the Jam and Asuka files, along with a bunch of other files, which we'll touch into some of those later too, were actually removed with the last patch. So hey, that's good news at least. As for the arcade, he's never actually referenced there, which is kind of weird to me. Oh well. The final negative factor would probably be him at the end of the story. He is headed to a space colony right now to hide and protect the tomb, which he fused with himself. It's a whole thing. If you don't know what's going on, don't worry about it. And he's also there starting a radio station, which we hear him, broadcasting at the end of the story. Again, don't worry about it if you haven't seen it. But he might just be gone from the new story. Like, he's in space and doesn't really want to come down, I'd imagine, given he wants to protect the tomb. However, I do want to point out dope as hell thing they could do with this. One, a space map. Come on, that'd be so flippin' cool. And so guilty. That would fit right in. On top of that, they could have his intro be like him coming from space, some like Beerus from Dragon Ball intro type thing. Overall, I think he's more what the people really want to see as compared to the most hinted or likely. He also fits into the trend perfectly. White hair, new male. Just saying, Gold Lewis, Happy Chaos, so, if you believe in that, there you go. But, again, even though the people want him, there is still a lot backing him, so hopefully we'll get to see him down the line, or maybe even in a couple of weeks. The final big three, and probably the one you hear the least, is, but hey, listen, hear me out, Delilah. Most of you probably have heard the name at least. She's Bedman's little sister. And while you might think I'm crazy, given how we haven't even seen her yet, except in Zerd when, we got a peek at her feet, so, there you go. You might be surprised by how much she's been teased at. So first, the story mode. She is the only character, besides Baiken, name drop that isn't a playable character or scene in the story. She has it out for that man, for being the one who ultimately killed her brother, and with how things played out in the story, we're probably heading to her location next. Like, Chip and Nago have connections since both their fighting styles seem to be branches of the Korito style, as mentioned by Nagoriyuki, and Chip also noticed similarities. Anji in his arcade mode actually befriends Nago, and Nago doesn't jump away at the end. Very interesting. I'm not sure if you don't do that for others. And finally, in Jacko's arcade, yes, Jacko's, if you beat level 9 Nago, he tells Jacko that he plans to go with the ninja and the geisha, which of course Chip, Anji, which is a weird thing to be brought up in her arcade mode. So I think this just gives us even more credibility that they want us to have in our heads that we're heading to Delilah. Speaking of arcade, Happy Chaos Arcade talks a lot about Bedman, and Baiken's is just Delilah City. She refers to her twice as that girl and a girl about half my age. And if we go back to Baiken's original teaser and her trailer, she also talks about Delilah a lot. In the teaser, she directly name drops her, telling her not to worry. And in the Baiken trailer, she has some quotes referring to Delilah, like, in the end, she believed in herself. Probably talking about Delilah, of course. And if we look at the data mines, we've actually seen a folder of a bed titled Bed W. Bedwoman? Question mark? Could be. So that's pretty cool, and it also was removed like a lot of the other files with the Baiken release, including, of course, the Asuka and Jam one. But yeah, since she's probably going to play a big role in the new story mode, it would really work out well to have her be the one to introduce and start off as well. And since she's not tied to any old maps, it would also be okay for her to drop with the White House map. But yeah, those are the three characters that I see as being the most likely for this final DLC, given just the backing that they have in Strive as a whole lore-wise. Of course, they could throw curveball at us, and there have actually been a few other characters that have had stuff in Strive that may point to them being added in the future. So, that's how we're going to move into this next section of this video, the speed round. So, as the name implies, we're just going to be kind of going a little bit faster with these next few characters, as they don't really have as much backing, but again, they have been mentioned in the story, so I feel like they are prevalent to bring up. And the first one being actually Jam. So Jam had her model leaked, a while ago, and while it's never really been touched and it has been removed recently, I think people are a little bit doubtful that that really means too much. However, if you do Jacko's arcade mode and you lose one of your rounds to that first Jacko mirror fight, she actually refers to someone as that Kung Fu girl. So we'll probably get to see her down the line. And if you'd lost hope, seeing as her folder never really got touched and then was removed, hey, maybe the fact that they added a DLC character and that then went out of her way to, mention her is enough to reignite some of your hope for her. Of course, she's not the only character that we see referenced a little bit. In the story mode, Kai mentions that his goal with the G4 Summit is to actually announce his family to the world.
I merely said that I plan to make my family public at G4.
Which is a little weird and, it's because, Daryl went to the G4 Summit. Kai did not, which makes sense given that they don't want to, have all their kings go. It's kind of like one person per nation. So was Daryl gonna actually announce this to the world? Be like, yo, one of our kings married a gear, now they have a kid. Is that okay? Or was Kai gonna call in and be like, yo, I got my hot wife, she's actually a gear, and I got my kids a gear. Anyways, hope your meeting's going well. I think it would have probably been better if they actually, brought him, but that's besides the point. Daryl was OD in the story, so it's cool. But his family, of course, referring to his wife, Dizzy, who's the daughter of Justice and Soul. I say that with a question mark because they have intercourse at some point. That's never really been touched on, but implied, of course. And of course, his son Sin, who is also a gear. Not sure if he's a commander gear or not, but he did age rapidly, so he is at least a gear. And it would actually make a lot of sense if these are story-driven DLC that we haven't seen them yet, because the G4 Summit's probably going to be over by the time this next story mode rolls around. So it makes sense that then they would finally come out of hiding and show themselves to the world. And actually, they aren't the only characters that we don't get to see in the story mode. And what I mean by that is there's actually 3 characters in one DLC that we don't see at all in the story mode. That being May, Faust, Ram, and now with the addition of Baiken. And although all these characters are never seen in the story, we do actually get to see them in the credits, along with all the other Strive characters, Zerd characters, and another person that we'll talk about later. But the interesting one I found was Faust, because Faust was seen walking around the world with Chronus. Chronus, of course, being one of the Conclave members and one of the Apostles, meaning that he was taught by Happy Chaos directly. So, similar to Asuka, right? He's never actually been playable in any other games, but he's been seen. But it would be really interesting to see them, A, just have a conversation in the story mode, but B, also see him maybe be playable for the first time. So, I wouldn't count him out as well. If you think Asuka is going to be playable this time around, hey, maybe you few Chronos fans are also, out there rooting for him. Anyways, the next subject I really wanted to talk about was actually in-game. When characters either lose or in some of their taunts, they'll mention by name characters that aren't in the game. The first one I wanted to go into was May with Johnny, because similar situation with Faust, she's not in the story, but in the credits we get to see her hanging out with the Jellyfish Pirates, and that includes Johnny. And when she loses as well, she'll shout out Johnny sometimes. So if we do go off the idea that the DLC is very story driven, which again it's been looking like that thus far anyways, it would make sense that we might finally get to see her in the story, hanging out with Johnny and his whole, new drip. Maybe he has a bigger hat. I don't know what's going on with him, right? The next one I wanted to talk about is actually Potemkin with Gabriel. And I know a lot of people are going to be like, oh, well, that's, Gabriel's not really playable, but hey, I think Asuka's going to finally be playable. Might also finally be Gabriel time, right? And then the next 2 are the ones that we've already heard about, Dizzy and Sin. They're brought up by both Kai, so it's always good when he loses. Well, not when he loses, Guy's a cool guy, he's a cool boy. But also Ram. Ram was also not seen in the story, but she was seen in the credit hanging out with Dizzy, Sin, and Elphelt. And you're like, oh, well, we saw all Lizard characters. Ram actually also name drops in 2 different quotes, Bedman and Elphelt. So hey, your Zerd waifu shotgunning queen, hey, she might be back, so either be happy or scared for that. And hey, a name drops more than a lot of characters got to go off, right? And like I also mentioned earlier, is one thing I wanted to touch upon was in the credits, we did get to see all the Strive and Zerd characters. So while I don't think that means like all the Zerd characters are coming back, right? They actually did show one other character, that being Testament, who, obviously wasn't playable, and we didn't see any other XX or older characters. And it actually make a lot of sense. Not only is Testament a, fan favorite, you hear a lot of people asking for him back, he also is a gear. So in Zerd, Kai mentioned that he wants to, create a world where gears and people can coexist, which we'll also wrap back to. That's a very interesting thing. And with his, wanting to announce his family, he's also probably trying to, further that being passed and, normalized in the world. So it would make a lot of sense for Testament to finally maybe come out. Maybe, he comes out on his own, or maybe Dizzy will like go on a quest to like find him and be like, hey, humans are chill now. I know you don't like them, but they're pretty cool guys. And if we also go off the idea that, Kai's trying to normalize the coexistence between gears and humans, another very interesting character is Izuna. If you don't know who Izuna is, that's fine. He's an Overtune 2 character, and, there's not too many people asking for him, but yeah, like my boy Kizzy K asking for him, so, I had to bring it up and explain why he's actually might be a character that we at least get to see in the story. So, I got a real quick question for y'all. Where is Baiken's map? Japan? Well, they actually never say where it's at, and the reason that that's interesting is because if you compare it to Overturn 2's map, or like place, Underworld Hill, the place where Izuna lives, there are so many similarities. From the buildings to the waterfalls and mountains in the background. On top of that, we see a lot of fox spirits on the stage, and Izuna is a fox guardian spirit. He was actually created by the backyard as like a glitch after Japan was destroyed. While he does state that he's not like much of a fighter, he does use yokai to fight and possesses teleportation magic. So look out for him in this story at least. Possibly staying with Chip and Anji's gang as well, given that that was Baiken's map, so it might imply that we're heading there. So again, either way, just a cool little thing that could point at him finally making his appearance into a fighting game version of Stride. And that actually leads into our next character, Answer. He actually is a part of Chip's gang, given that he works for him. And since Chip and Anji went off to, go see Happy Chaos for their own eyes, it makes sense that Answer's kind of holding down the fort at home for Chip and kind of doing all the work that he would have had to do. So we might get to see him, chilling possibly with Baiken and Delilah as well. And speaking of Delilah, I do have to mention her brother. I know, he's dead, and he's not going back, blah, 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 blah. However, I gotta be fair, right? His name's been brought up quite a bit, as I stated by Ram and Happy Chaos. And in the Happy Chaos arcade mode, which, honestly, this deserves like a whole video in and of itself, which I'll love to do probably in the future, he talks about how both Nago and Bedman weren't born demi-humans. They actually became them. Nago became one by becoming a vampire, since vampires are just, by nature, I guess, demi-humans, and Bedman did his through a more interesting way of deleting his own universal ID, since demi-humans or higher beings just don't have a universal ID to begin with. And, demi-humans live in a higher plane of existence, and they're often anchors across all the universes and paradoxes. So, we might see the return of Bedman, given that one version of him might have died, and we, if we're playing with Paradox's multiverse, right, we might see another one come in. But he could also be dead, given that he performed like a miracle, so he might have just like flat out killed all versions of himself, or just like the one higher actual version of himself. I don't know, but again, I at least felt like I had to name him. I know, I might be a little crazy, but again, gotta play it fair, right? And if you thought I was kind of like diving deep for that one, oh, just you wait. We got two more that I think are like possible new characters that we will get to see, which I am also pretty hyped for. And the first one is that when Happy Chaos was, talking about demi-humans, he also brought up that werewolves are demi-humans, which, makes sense given that vampire werewolf. But did we see a werewolf new character DLC? You might be like, oh, well, where did we see one? If we go off this idea that's been around for a while, that Rachel Alucard from Blaze Blue is somehow connected to Slayer, possibly being both from that like higher, well, they are both higher, beings being demi-humans, but maybe being from the same place or like even being connected some way, given their same birthday and mannerisms and color palettes. It would make sense because Rachel has a werewolf companion that Slayer, if we see him in this new story, might have picked up a brand new companion that's a werewolf. So, werewolf character coming to Strive? Come on, it would totally fit, and we've seen this in past games, especially Zerg, right? Where they really like to do this kind of, half and half with new and old characters. And to be fair, this could be the first game where they like predominantly do, old characters, given how many old characters they are. But hey, I'm sure they're probably gonna want to throw in some new characters, and this would absolutely just fit right in. And speaking of BlazBlue, damn, these transitions are kind of solid, not gonna lie, but we also have to talk about another point brought up by Happy Chaos in the arcade mode, that through demi-humans, you can actually travel between these universes and paradoxes. This is because it seems that Ino's fear in the story came true, where, she actually did probably create a paradox, and that's where she, that's a whole thing I'll probably talk about later, but like that one that we see at the end of her isn't her, it's a different one. But anyways, she and Happy Chaos ended up in this paradox. And he plans to try to get back through that Nagoriyuki in that existence. And so, we're now almost connecting the world of Guilty Gear and BlazBlue through this, multiverse type story, right? So we could finally see one of the BlazBlue characters come over as a crossover character. And Ragnar would actually make the most sense, since he died or got erased and was forgotten about at the end of the story. I don't know, I didn't watch it, just kind of read up on it and heard a bit about it, but this could also just mean that he was actually sent to another universe or paradox that was created when he made his sacrifice, which, is Strive. And maybe in his arcade mode in the future, if he ever does get added, will help him get back to his BlazBlue world. And, that could set up how he's in the next BlazBlue game, right? So, kind of tying it through, I think that'd be really cool. And to be fair, we'd probably see him as the last DLC if we ever did, but, I might be digging too much for this, but I just find it awesome that this possibility is even opened up in the first place. But, anyways, that pretty much wraps it up. Those are all the characters that I noticed and have kind of seen that have ties to Strive that aren't in yet. Let me know what y'all think, as well as any other topics you'd like me to talk about in the future. With Arc Revo America coming up this March 19th, there's a lot of hype around the announcements and world premiere trailers that it will bring. So I really want to try to make quite a few videos going over the lore and what we know so far going into it, so you can be all caught up with accurate information about it. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. It means a lot if you actually made it this far, and love you all, guys, and hey, take care.